Yeah, so today I'm going to take you behind the scene of drafting a bill that is changing the way that families are handling their conflicts in Israel. The bill was drafted in 2013 and passed in the Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament, on December 8, 2014. It was the last night of the parliament, just before the beginning of the election turmoil. It's a last-minute thing, so it came out. But it took another 18 months before the law was implemented. It was only implemented in July 2016. And now we can say, after looking at the result of the implementation of this law, that it managed to decrease the number of claims in family disputes in Israel very dramatically. The first year we had a 70% drop in the numbers of lawsuits in family conflicts in Israel. But as I thought in the beginning, the 70% drop wasn't real. It was too good to be true. And the second year we saw the numbers, was just released in Israel before I left, and we're talking about 45% decrease. So it's still a lot. It's a game changer. So I'll explain how it works, and I'll tell you the story of how I became a social activist without even thinking about it or planning it. But first, I want to tell you about Israel, about my country. It's a very small country. Israel is located in the Middle East. If you can see the tiny, tiny dot over here in the middle. And it's a democratic Jewish state on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea and surrounded by Arab states. We say that in Israel, Israel is warm and wonderful. A country literally warm. Feelings run high, temperatures run high, and it's a state of contrast because it's also the Holy Land and the startup nations. So we have different contradictions and cultural differences. It's the cradle of the three monotheistic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But you need to remember that although Judaism is ancient, the state of Israel is very young. It's only 70 years old. So in 1948, Israel was recognized by the UN and became an independent state. And today we have the population of almost 9 million people. So in American terms, it's a small place. But still, I'm talking about all of this because I want you to get the perspective of the family law. And why is that? Because Israel is a Jewish democracy. We all know what a democracy is. What is a Jewish state? Is there a contradiction between the two? And this has very big arguments connected to it, but regarding today, this matter of family law, I need you to know that with the establishment of the Israeli state, it was decided that the law that existed in Palestine in 1948 will remain in force. It was mainly the British Mandate Law, which stated, see in the next slide, if you can read it, I don't know, it's the lighting.
Okay.
It's okay? Can you read it?
There.
Okay, so the King's ordering council, which was here when the state was established, stated that matters of personal law, which means marriage and divorce and all things related, the law is actually a religious one, meaning that all matters of marriage are settled according to the religious affiliation of each individual. People ask me, so what the law does in Israel say? We say, okay, it depends. Are you a Christian? Are you a Jew? Are you a Muslim? Are you a Druze? That's family law differs for every religion. and it is within the exclusive domain of the religious courts. And each religious community in Israel has its own system of religious courts. That means, and it's governed by their own religious law. I hope you can see that. I counted down how many courts each religion has in Israel. You can see that the Jews has the biggest system with 13 rabbinical courts. The Muslims have 9 Sharia courts, and the Druze have 3, and we have Catholic courts, and we have other Christians we have no data of because they have complete and absolute autonomy. The state doesn't know what's going on there. Okay, so in a feminist perspective, there are many critics about that because we have religious code that we have no power of. That's a bit hard, and let's see why. So the religious divorce for Jews, the get we call it in Hebrew, must be granted by the husband and accepted by the wife. Good, right? It's legally only if it's granted by the husband on free will without coercion. If the divorce is done by coercion, it's not good, like it never happened, religiously speaking. Grounds for the divorce in the rabbinical court are very strict and therefore mostly granted by the consent of both parties. And the husband can refuse to give the divorce to the wife, and she's hung by the thread of that she can remain married indefinitely. And on the other hand, the husband can get a permission from the rabbinical court to remarry another woman, to get married to another woman, although he's still married to that woman. It's called a special permission from 100 rabbis. It's rarely given, but the fact that this possibility exists shifts the balance of power between the couples. Okay, so there's no such possibility for Jewish women, and that's why. The reason for that is there's a big difference in religious meaning about having children while being still married to another man. A Jewish woman who is married will have, if she will have children with another man, the children will be another man that is not her husband. Okay, the children will be illegitimate in a religious way. They cannot marry another Jew, for example. So that's a bit overwhelming. Although if the husband will do that, if we have children with another woman while being married, the children will not be illegitimate, religiously speaking. Okay, it can be an immoral thing, but no religious outcomes. So, having been said that, although most Israeli Jews are not Orthodox, they are secular, this religious restriction has a very big impact, socially speaking. So, that's the Jews, Muslim and Druze. And it's not such great there either for women. Marriage in Islam law, which is called Sharia, is a contract, which is by definition a good idea. But the Sharia grants the husband the right to divorce his wife whenever he wants and for whatever reason. And the wife has no power to refuse her husband's wishes. If the husband wants a divorce, the wife just divorces and she can say nothing about it. On the other hand, that doesn't happen. There is a little possibility for a wife under Muslim law to insert a clause in their marriage contract changing that, but it has to be signed during the time of the marriage. So the Sharia does grant the wife a possibility to get a divorce in certain cases, like the husband prolonged absence, but still the shift of power is not so on behalf of the women. And the Druze divorce law is exactly the same as the Muslims, except for one major change. Once a Druze man had divorced his wife, he cannot remarry her under any circumstances. So in the Druze religious court, they are very careful about granting a divorce request from either side because they cannot change their mind later. They cannot remarry each other. So, I think that was difficult. Go ahead. It gets more complicated than that. And why is that? Although the Israeli law gives the religious court jurisdiction in matters of divorce and marriage, in parallel we have a civil court system that also deals with matters related to family conflicts, such as child support and division of property. So, but the civil family court cannot perform a religious divorce or a religious marriage. They can treat everything. Good morning, Chris. Thank you for coming.
Oh, so sorry. I'm late.
They can treat everything else, but not do the marriage or the divorce itself because it's a completely religious ceremony. Meaning no religious ceremony, no divorce or no marriage. It has to be kosher, so to say. Okay. So this situation that I've just described has a name, if you can read it. It's concurrent jurisdiction. Means that there's a dual law system. Okay, good morning. Thank you for coming. Just missed the part of me talking about Israeli family law, but you came to the juicy part, so welcome. Be seated.
That's the juicy.
Yeah, thank you.
I just annoy the women by telling them about how tough is the women's situation in Israeli family law because we have a religious court system and the divorce and marriage in Israel is absolute domain of the religious courts. Each religion has its own court system, the Druze, the Muslim, the Jews, and in parallel we have a civil family court system. That means that in a family court, civil family court, and a religious court, we have different laws regarding the same couple. Okay, you can go to one court and the court will decide this, and you go to another court and it will decide completely different. So what happens there? We have different judicial methods, different legal system, tradition, and worldviews. And the different is particularly important in matters of fault. Okay, in the civil court system, we have a no-fault divorce approach. But in all religious court system, it's all about fault. And it's not only fault, it's about even sexual orientation can give you a big discount on your property, okay, and so on. So you don't really want to be there in all circumstances. And the trials in the religious court system are all about the fault. Who is to blame in bringing the relationship to an end? Okay, that's all we care about. So in this situation, we have concurrent jurisdiction. We have dual systems, and both parties are anxious to get the jurisdiction in the place that is most favorable for them. Okay? So, for example, a wife can ask for special remedies in the religious Jewish court or rabbinical court, such as a petition to stay in the house. Which means she asked the religious court that the husband will come back to the house and they will get reunited. And the religious court can give her that kind of court order. They should go out together, they should go to counsel therapy, you can't sell the house. Meaning that if the husband submit his lawsuit in the family court to have the house sold, he cannot sell the house because the religious court gave court order saying that you have to call it shlom bayit, okay, the peace of the house. You have to be a good spouse and stay in the house because you have to do whatever you can to save the marriage. So that's one thing that a religious court can give and a family court cannot give. On the other hand, if there's proof of betrayal from the side of the woman, she doesn't want to be in the religious court. Okay, she can lose everything. She can lose custody, she can lose property, so she doesn't want to be there. So it's very, very stressful situation because of the substantial differences between the two systems.
Is it a foot race, so to speak? Like,
Yeah,
so
we're going
who
to talk
gets-
about the race. That's the race.
Who goes
Yeah.
first?
Yeah,
Who goes first,
completely. That's the next slide. Race to authority. Thank you. Yeah, in order to avoid contradictory decisions and to ensure that both court systems respect each other, the Supreme Court of Israel decided that the first court to which the lawsuit is submitted is the court to decide on the concurrent issues. Okay? Either way, the family court cannot decide on the question of divorce. Okay? They cannot do the religious divorce, but they can decide everything else. Okay, so if I submitted my lawsuit to the family court first, I can go ahead there. So we have a race. If a husband submitted his lawsuit to the family court on Monday and the wife submitted her lawsuit to the religious court on Thursday, we will do the trial in the first one.
That's why we even started to run in Israel.
Yeah, that's the race. Race to authorities. That's the way it's translated. I translated most of the terms literally. Okay? Race to authorities. We have mom, we have dad. They're racing each other. But the race begins in a very, very early stage of the conflict, because the moment you even think about divorce, you have to run for it. You cannot ask your spouse, do you want to, can we agree? No, you cannot ask even. You think about it, you know, maybe he won't agree. Okay, I have to run for it. Run for your life and submit a lawsuit. So you can say, to sum it up, that in Israel there is a necessity, regardless for the parties' relationship, to submit lawsuits in family conflicts. Moreover, a lawyer, a family lawyer, advising his client or her client what to do, must advise to file the lawsuit as soon as possible. If you don't do that, that's malpractice. Okay, so the pressure is even stronger. So I call it the legal default. Okay? Starting to get my way of seeing the situation in a more, my analysis is based off a lot of things. One of them is behavioral economics, so I'm calling this the default. In other words, the litigation in family dispute is the default model in Israel. Law basically directs a couple planning to divorce to run to the court as quickly as possible. So for us as problem solvers, lawyers that believe that families should not go to court, that's a very big dilemma. How can we tell families to go to collaborative divorce when this is the legal default? So it's a painful dilemma, and Pauline Tesler calls it the cognitive dissonance. Okay, when you know that you're giving bad advice for your clients, you know that if you're the new lawyer type, like Julie McFarland said, okay, you know that it's best not to go to court, it's best to negotiate, but you know also that you have to go to court, so you know you're advising something that will harm your clients at the end of the day. So I didn't like that. Okay. What's the effect of that? Well, I think everyone here knows that litigation really makes the conflict escalate, harms the kids. I don't think I need to say a lot about that. It's like, you know. And I had a client, it was 10 years ago, a religious woman, a religious Jewish woman in her 60s. She was very nice. She came into my office and said, listen, my husband is very good, but I'm in love with another man, and I want a divorce. But she knew he will not give her the divorce. She said, I don't want to write anything bad about him. Tough luck, you don't have a choice. 10 years ago, you had to do it. 4 years ago, you had to do it. So we ended up writing down every little bad thing she could remember about their 40 or more years together. And we submitted lawsuits. I'll go to the end. They didn't divorce in the end. Okay? He was a very, very smart man, professor at one of the universities in Israel. And he made a smart decision. He never read the lawsuits. Okay? Smart man. He said, I want to do everything to win her heart back. They went back to therapy. He made some major life-changing decisions. He wrote like many books before. He stopped writing books. They spent more time together, and now they live, hopefully will live happily ever after with all their grandchildren. But this case in particular made me think, okay, about these nice clients. They do not want to harm their spouses. They want to divorce, but they don't want to do it in a bad and hurtful way. Just they want their liberty, they want respect, and the system forces them, because of the legal default, the system forces them to go to court. They have no other choice. And most men and most women can't resist the curiosity. We read the lawsuits. And what happens when we read the lawsuits? And what usually happens? I try to do the images as sort of reality bites, but the image is the ground underneath you is opening. It's like many clients say, like, I received a lawsuit. Earthquake! Ah, what happened? This is a surprise. How come? Okay, we hear that a lot from my clients, so the visual effects are going in that direction. Total shock. Earthquake, we hear that a lot. So, and why is that? Because the lawsuit consists of insulting and abusive accusation, mostly. And in my experience, even if we are, as family lawyers, trying to check the story, trying to be careful, to be very moderate in our arguments, not to be so hurtful, still, as hard as we will try, we're only telling one side of the story. Okay? Most people have the same experience, but experience very differently. So we're stating one point of view, and usually reading that point of view is very hurtful for the other party. Just to hear the other point of view, without insulting, without saying nasty or untrue things, okay? Just the client's truth is hurtful for the other party. So I had a hard time with that, and another reason I had a hard time with that because I didn't believe that's the story. Okay, I don't believe there's truth, sorry. I don't believe this is one story, and every one of us has his own story, and together it's a bigger story. So telling the story from my point of view is not telling the story from another point of view. We are lawyers, we're accustomed to change point of views all the time, and that's hurtful. We hurt people. Okay, another thing I didn't like to. I'm very good at litigating. I'm sorry. I hurt people all the time. That's what I do. Don't like it. So how can I change that? And what happens when a person reads the lawsuits that was submitted against him? He gets hurt. His ego gets hurt. And what happens later? The ego must respond. So we submit a response. And what happens in the response? Counter-accusation, denial, and the whole circle escalates and escalates and escalates. So I found myself in a position that the legal default is escalating the family conflict. And I cannot responsibly advise clients to do collaborative. Okay? I can, but I need to explain the risks, and maybe the risks are just too high. Okay. Another point of view is the damage that all these lawsuits and litigation does to our society. Okay, we know the damage to their relationship. We know that submitting lawsuit damages the relationship mostly, in most cases, for good. And the chances they will be able to choose alternative dispute resolution like ADR afterwards decreases, and the chance there will be seeing each other either than enemy is not so great, and the family conflict escalates. They cannot do family dinners, they cannot do religious ceremonies, they cannot go to school parties, and so on. So what happens? Now we have zillion data, studies, research about the damage to the kids, about the damage to society that's caused by litigation. The children are caught in the middle, and the damage for society increase and increase. So that's the legal default, and we understand that it's destructive to society. So how can we change that? There's no political chance to differentiate the religious from the country. Okay, it's a religious Jewish state. I said that in the beginning. Okay, that's Israel. It's a religious state, a religious democracy. So what can we do about it? That's even harder to understand, to comprehend, if we take into account the importance of the Israeli family in the Israeli culture. Okay? So the legal default contradicts the values of the centrality of the family. I'm not saying that people are not allowed to divorce. I'm not against divorce. I'm saying something different completely. And I will show you the data that I collected that I think are relevant to this perspective and to my conclusion about the centrality of family values in Israel. I said family values not the way that you American or whatever call. I'll explain the values that I talk about in the Israeli culture. That's a bit different. So as you can see, we have 1.77 million families. Most of them are Jews, the others are mostly Arabs. Half of the family consists of two parents and children under the age of 17. 90% of the couples are married. Okay? And another thing that you need to know that Israeli is defined by Israeli extended family has characteristic of very close ties. Some of us Israelis seem that very, it's like, that's the way we do things. We have Friday dinners with all the children and the grandchildren every Friday, okay? We do holidays together. I call my mom every day. We have family WhatsApp groups. We have, I think you don't have it anywhere in the world. We have family WhatsApp groups that we talk all day, we share videos all day, we share pictures all day. I know what my niece wore in the morning. And I know what she's going to wear at night. Every day. All the family.
That's wonderful.
And all the families do that. Okay? All the families do that. It's an Israeli phenomena, the family WhatsApp groups.
Mass psychosis.
Yeah, we're a traumatized society.
Wait, we went west.
I know.
I just showed him an example of a WhatsApp group.
Her son is texting her.
Mine in the morning sent me a video saying, "Go ahead, Mom."
Yeah, that's great.
That's how we do things. Okay, so what I call it. Okay, I came to the conclusion in my few years of being a social activist in Israel that familism, okay, the centrality of the family, is a common denominator of the multicultural state, because all sectors in Israel have in mind that family comes first. Family is the most important thing in Israeli's personal life, whatever it is, Arab, Jew, Christian, Muslim, whatever. All sectors of society, if you're secular Jew, if you're ultra-Orthodox Jew, you ask everyone, they will tell you, what's the most important thing in life? Family. What's the second important thing in life? Being a parent. For Israeli to be a parent is to be accepted in society. It's like the entry ticket. And I'll give you examples with data. Okay? To explain why I came to this conclusion. Same-sex marriage in Israel is not an option. Okay? Because all marriages are religious ceremonies. But did the same-sex couples go to the streets in order to be able to get married in Israel? They didn't. They went on demonstrations for the right to have kids as same-sex couples. They went on claiming they need to be able to adopt, to undergo surrogacy procedures,